I stood in the marble lobby of that glass tower, clutching a Tupperware of lemon pound cake like it was the last piece of home I had left to give. My grandson Callan loved that cake. Used to beg for it every Sunday after church when he was small, flour still dusting my apron, his little hands reaching up before it even cooled. Now he was 32, running his own architectural firm, and I hadn't seen him in 3 months. 3 whole months of excuses. Meetings. Deadlines. Travel. Always something. So I surprised him. The receptionist smiled when I walked in, that polite confusion people get when an old woman appears where she doesn't quite belong. I told her I was Callan's grandmother. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. That little crack in her composure, like I'd said something that made her uncomfortable. She picked up the phone, hands shaking slightly, then set it back down without dialing. He's in a meeting right now, she said too quickly. Maybe you could come back? I wasn't coming back. I'd taken 2 buses to get here, my knees aching the whole way. I smiled and told her I'd wait. She nodded, but something was wrong. The way she wouldn't look at me. The way her eyes kept darting to the elevator, like she was expecting something terrible to happen. That's when I saw it. A photograph on the reception desk, half hidden behind a stack of folders. Callan. My Callan. His arm wrapped around a woman with glossy dark hair and a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. They were laughing. That intimate kind of laughing where bodies lean into each other like magnets. Her hand rested on his chest. His eyes were on her like she was the only person in the world. The woman in that picture wasn't Margaret. Margaret, his wife of 7 years. Margaret, who just told me last week she was 5 months pregnant. Margaret, who still sent me thank you cards for every small kindness and called me Nana even though she didn't have to. My hands went cold. The Tupperware felt heavy now. Absurd. A grandmother's offering in a world where grandmothers didn't matter anymore. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to see who they truly are? Comment I understand if you felt that sting. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The elevator chimed. That bright, cheerful sound that announces arrivals. The door slid open and there he was. Callan. My grandson. My daughter's only child. The boy I'd raised after she died. The boy I'd worked double shifts for so he could go to college. He stepped out laughing, head thrown back, carefree. And beside him was her. The woman from the photograph. In real life, she was even more polished. Expensive perfume reached me before they did. His hand rested on the small of her back. Familiar. Possessive. They didn't see me at first. They were too wrapped up in whatever private joke they were sharing. But the receptionist saw me, and her face went white. She tried to say something, tried to warn him, but it was too late. Callan looked up. Our eyes met. The laughter died in his throat like someone had turned off a switch. His hand dropped from the woman's back. For one long, terrible second, we just stared at each other. 3 generations of love and sacrifice crumbling in a hotel lobby that smelled like money and lies. Nana. His voice cracked on the word. What are you doing here? I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man in his expensive suit with his architect's confidence and his mistress standing 2 feet away, already backing toward the elevator, like she could escape what was happening. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up sewing his clothes when money was tight. All the times I'd told him he was special. That he was different. That he'd been raised right. I thought I raised you to be better than this. I didn't shout it. Didn't cry. Just said it soft and clear, the way you tell someone a simple fact they should have already known. Then I set the Tupperware on the reception desk, turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard the mistress's heels clicking frantically toward the elevator. Running away. At least she had the decency to be ashamed. But Callan just stood there. Frozen. Watching me leave with that cake he'd loved so much, now sitting abandoned on a stranger's desk, getting cold. I didn't go straight home. Couldn't. My legs carried me to Riverside Park instead, the same bench where I used to bring Callan when he was 6 years old. Back then, We'd feed the ducks stale bread, and he'd ask me why the sky was blue, why leaves changed colors, why his mama had to die so young. I never had good answers for that last one. Still don't. The afternoon sun cut through the trees in golden slices, but I felt cold all the way through. My hands were shaking. Not from age. From something deeper. A betrayal that started in my chest and spread like poison. I raised that boy.
Me.
After my daughter Sarah passed from cancer when Callan was only 4, I stepped in. Gave up my quiet retirement, went back to work at the grocery store, traded my free time for parent-teacher conferences and Little League games. His father had left before he was born, so it was just us. Just me and this little boy who looked at me like I hung the moon. I taught him right from wrong. Took him to church every Sunday. Made sure he said please and thank you. Told him that a man's word was his bond, that promises meant something, that you protected the people who loved you. And he'd listened. Or so I thought. He'd been such a good boy. Gentle. Thoughtful. The kind of kid who'd share his lunch with whoever forgot theirs. Where did I lose him? The sun was setting when my phone rang. Margaret's name lit up the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. What could I possibly say to her? But I answered.
Had to.
Nana? I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. I need you to trust me.
Can you do that?
Yes. She didn't even hesitate. I want you to start Didn't say where he'd been. Just went straight to the shower and then to bed. This morning he was gone before I woke up. I set down a plate of toast she would eat. Did you look for those statements I mentioned? She nodded and pulled out her phone. I found something in the mail. A credit card bill. But it's not for a card. It's addressed to him at a P.O. box I didn't know he had. She showed me the screen. Her hands were trembling. The charges made my stomach turn. Expensive restaurants. Hotels. Jewelry stores. Thousands of dollars spent in the last 3 months alone, while he told his pregnant wife they were broke. Margaret, honey, what else has he said about money? She set down the coffee. 2 weeks ago, the electricity almost got shut off.
He forgot to pay it, he said.
But we've never missed a bill before. Then last week I tried to use our debit card at the pharmacy, and it got declined. When I called him, he said there was a mix-up at the bank, that he'd handle it. But Nana, we used to have savings. We had almost $40,000 put away for the baby, for emergencies. Now he says it's gone. All of it. Says he had to invest it back into the firm to keep things running.
$40,000. Gone.
Well, he bought another woman jewelry and took her to hotels. Has he always controlled the money like this? She looked down. Ashamed. It started after we got married. He said he was better with finances, that I should just focus on making our house a home. I thought it was sweet at first. Traditional. My friends said I was lucky to have a husband who handled all the stress of bills and budgets. Her voice cracked. But now I feel trapped. I don't even know how much money we have or don't have. I'm about to have a baby and I have no idea if we can even afford diapers. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're not trapped. You hear me? You're not. But even as I said it, I felt something dark and heavy settling in my chest. This wasn't the grandson I'd raised. This was someone else wearing his face. Someone who'd learned to manipulate and control, who'd turned love into a weapon. After Margaret left, I sat in my living room staring at the wall where Callan's graduation photo hung. That proud smile. That bright future. I'd been so sure he'd make something good of his life. And he had in a way. Just not the way I'd hoped.
My phone rang.
A number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Hartwell? A woman's voice. Hesitant. Yes. This is Linda. From Callan's office. The receptionist. I probably shouldn't be calling you, but after yesterday? She trailed off. My heart started pounding. What is it, honey? That woman. Vanessa. She's not just his girlfriend. She works here. He hired her 6 months ago as a junior partner. But Mrs. Hartwell, the money. I've seen things. Transfers. Large ones. To accounts I don't recognize. I shouldn't be telling you this. I could lose my job. But when I saw you yesterday with that cake, looking at him like he was still that good person you thought he was. Her voice broke. Someone needs to know what's happening. Before it's too late. Would you keep silent or confront the truth head-on? Have you ever ignored a red flag? Linda gave me details. Account numbers she glimpsed. Names of clients who'd been calling, angry about missing payments. A paper trail that stank of fraud. Before we hung up, she said one more thing that made my blood run cold. He's been moving money, a lot of it, into accounts under Vanessa's name. I think he's hiding assets. I think he's planning something. After she hung up, I sat in the silence of my empty house. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner. Outside, kids played in the street, their laughter floating through the windows. Normal life continuing while mine crumbled. Callan wasn't just having an affair. He was stealing. From his clients. From his wife. Maybe even from his own company. And he was setting up another woman to help him do it, using her name to hide his crimes. I thought about Margaret's scared voice. About that baby growing inside her. Innocent and unaware that his father was a thief. About all the years I'd spent teaching Callan right from wrong, thinking it had mattered. My daughter Sarah had died believing her son would be a good man. That belief had given her peace in those final days. She'd held my hand in that hospital bed and whispered, "Take care of my boy, Mama. Make him strong." And I'd promised I would. Now I had to decide what keeping that promise really meant. Did it mean protecting him? Or did it mean stopping him before he destroyed everyone who loved him? The answer came to me clear as glass. Sometimes love means letting someone fall, especially when they're pulling others down with them. I went back to his office 3 days later. This time I didn't bring cake. I brought determination wrapped in the disguise of a sweet old grandmother who just wanted to drop off some papers for her grandson. Estate documents, I told the new receptionist at the front desk. Linda wasn't there anymore. That should have been my first clue that things were getting worse. The new girl was young.
Eager.
She smiled and said she'd make sure Callan got them, but I insisted on leaving them in his office myself. Old woman's stubbornness. She couldn't really say no. His office was on the 14th floor. All glass and steel, overlooking the city like a kingdom he'd built. And maybe he had built it,
Just not with clean hands.
The walls were covered with architectural drawings, awards, photos of finished projects. But my eyes went straight to his desk. Another photograph, newer than the one downstairs. Callan and Vanessa in his car. That same BMW Margaret had asked about. They were laughing, her head thrown back, his hand on her knee. The photo was candid, intimate, the kind of picture you don't take unless you're in deep. I picked it up, studied it. In the background of the photo, I could see bags from expensive stores. Shopping bags with names I recognized from commercials. The kind of stores where a purse costs more than my monthly rent. Mrs. Hartwell? I turned. A man in his 50s stood in the doorway. Gray hair, expensive suit, nervous eyes. I'm Richard Chen. I'm one of the partners here. He glanced at the photograph in my hands. Something flickered across his face. Recognition. Worry. Can I help you with something? I set the photo down carefully. I'm just dropping off some papers for my grandson. Of course. But he didn't leave. He stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. Lowered his voice. Mrs. Hartwell, I don't know how much you know about what's happening here, but there are questions being asked. Clients have complained about billing discrepancies. Money that was supposed to go toward projects but never arrived. And Vanessa. He gestured to the photo. She's not qualified for the position Callan gave her. She has no architectural background, no business experience. But she's signing off on transfers. Large ones. My stomach dropped. How large? Hundreds of thousands. Maybe more. I've tried talking to Callan about it, but he shuts me down. Says I'm jealous. Says I don't understand the new direction he's taking the firm. But Mrs. Hartwell, this isn't business strategy. This is something else. We stood there in that glass office, two people who just admitted out loud what we'd both known deep down. Callan was stealing. From his partners. From his clients. From everyone who'd trusted him. What are you going to do?
I asked.
Richard looked tired.
Defeated.
I don't know. If I report him, the firm goes under. 20 employees lose their jobs. Our reputation gets destroyed. But if I don't... He trailed off. Didn't need to finish. We both knew what happened to people who looked the other way. After Richard left, I stood at Callan's window, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, Margaret was probably sitting in their house, worrying about bills she couldn't pay while her husband funneled money to his mistress. Somewhere down there, clients were wondering where their investments had gone. And somewhere down there, Callan was probably with Vanessa, planning his next move. That night, I met with Grace from church. She'd called me 2 days ago saying she needed to talk, that she'd seen something that troubled her. We met at a diner on 5th Street, the kind with red vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since morning. Grace slid into the booth across from me looking uncomfortable. Lorraine, I don't like gossip. You know that. But what I saw... She shook her head. It was Callan. Last Thursday night. At Marcello's, that Italian place downtown. He was with a young woman. Very pretty. Very cozy. They were talking about money. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. Something about transfers. About timing. About making sure things were moved before anyone noticed. If you discovered someone stealing from their own family, what would you do? Did he see you?
I asked. No.
I was with the church book club in the back room. But Lorraine, the way they were talking, it wasn't romantic. It was business. Criminal business. After Grace left, I sat in that diner, nursing cold coffee and making a decision I'd been avoiding for days. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I'd sworn I'd never need again. James Preston. My late husband's lawyer. The man who'd handled our estate 20 years ago and told me if I ever needed help, real help, to call him. He answered on the third ring. Lorraine Hartwell. It's been a long time. James, I need your help. And I need you to keep it quiet. There was a pause. Then, how quiet are we talking? The kind of quiet that could destroy my family if it goes wrong. Another pause. Longer this time. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Early. And Lorraine, bring everything you know. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the diner's window. An old woman with tired eyes and a broken heart. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being Callan's grandmother and become his investigator. His judge. Maybe his executioner. But Margaret's frightened voice kept playing in my head. That baby growing in her belly, innocent and pure, deserved better than a father who stole and lied. Deserved better than growing up watching his mother struggle while his father lived in luxury built on fraud. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering proof. Tomorrow, I'd begin the process of bringing down the boy I'd raised. Tomorrow, I'd learn if love was stronger than justice, or if justice was the only love left that mattered. But tonight, I just sat in that diner and grieved for the grandson I'd lost long before I ever walked into his office. James Preston's office smelled like old books and expensive coffee. He'd aged since I'd seen him last, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. But his mind was still sharp as a blade. He listened while I laid out everything. The affair. The money. Margaret's fear. Linda's phone call. Richard's concerns. Grace's observations. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. Lorraine, what you're describing is embezzlement. Possibly wire fraud. If what you're telling me is accurate, Callan could face serious prison time. The word hung between us. Prison. My grandson. The boy who'd once been afraid of thunderstorms and slept with a night light until he was 8. I need to know if I'm right, I said. I need proof. James pulled out a legal pad. Okay, here's what we do. Richard Chun, the partner who talked to you, he can give us access to firm records. That's our starting point. We'll need to trace the money. See where it's really going. If Callan's been moving funds to accounts under Vanessa's name, that's a paper trail we can follow. Over the next 2 weeks, James worked quietly. He called in favors. Talked to Richard. Got access to financial records that should have been confidential but weren't. Not when someone inside wanted the truth found. What we discovered made me sick. Callan had been stealing for almost a year. It started small. A few thousand here and there, buried in billing discrepancies. Money that clients paid, but never reached project accounts. Then it escalated. Larger transfers. Accounts created under Vanessa's name at 3 different banks. Shell companies registered in Delaware with her signature on the paperwork. But here's what made my blood boil. While Callan was moving hundreds of thousands into hidden accounts, he was telling Margaret they were broke, declining her debit card, letting bills go unpaid, putting his pregnant wife under financial stress that could harm her and the baby, all while he played rich man with his mistress. He's smart, James said, spreading documents across his desk. Or he thinks he is. He's been careful to keep Vanessa's name on everything. If this blows up, she takes the fall. He walks away claiming he was deceived.
So he's not just a thief, I said.
He's a coward who's willing to let someone else go to prison for his crimes. James nodded grimly. The question is, what do you want to do about it? We can go to the police right now. Turn over everything we've found. But Lorraine, once we do that, there's no taking it back. The investigation becomes public. The firm collapses. Margaret gets dragged through it. And Callan, he didn't finish. Didn't have to. I thought about Margaret's face when she'd sat at my kitchen table, scared and confused. Thought about that baby, who'd be born into chaos. Thought about my daughter Sarah, who'd trusted me to raise her son right. How long would it take for the authorities to build a case?
I asked. Weeks.
Maybe months. They'd need to investigate, verify everything we've found, interview witnesses. During that time, Callan might move more money, might disappear. We'd be giving him a head start. I looked at the papers scattered across James's desk. Numbers and bank statements and proof of betrayal. Then I thought about something my husband used to say. He'd been a patient man. A strategic one. Sometimes the best trap is the one they don't see coming. James, I don't want to report him yet. He raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because I want to watch. I want to see what he does when he thinks he's safe.
How far he'll go.
Who else he'll hurt. And when the time is right, when we have everything we need. I paused. Felt the weight of what I was about to say. Then we make sure he can't hurt anyone ever again. James studied me for a long moment. You're sure about this? You're talking about letting him commit more crimes just so the case is stronger. I'm talking about making sure justice sticks. That when it comes completely.
No loopholes.
No second chances. No walking away. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. Do you agree? He nodded slowly. Okay, we'll watch. But Lorraine, we need to protect Margaret. If Callan's moving money, we need to make sure she has something. Can you help her document everything? Get her name on at least one account. I promised I would. That afternoon, I went to Margaret's house. Found her in the nursery she'd been trying to set up, sitting on the floor surrounded by unopened boxes. She'd been crying. He said we can't afford a crib, she said when she saw me. Said I should ask my mother for help. But Nana, this is his baby too. How can we not afford a crib when he drives a $60,000 car? I sat down beside her on that floor, put my arm around her shoulders. Margaret, honey, I need to tell you something. And you need to trust me when I say that everything's going to be okay. But first, I need you to be strong. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. What's happening? Your husband is stealing. From his clients. From his firm. And from you. But we're going to stop him. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. And when we do, you're going to have everything you need to start over. I promise you that.
She didn't cry. Didn't scream.
Just nodded like some part of her had known all along. What do? You watch. You document. And you wait.
Can you do that?
Yes. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in weeks. For my baby, I can do anything. I left her house as the sun was setting. Drove home through streets that felt different now. Darker. But underneath the darkness, I felt something else. Purpose. My grandson thought he was smarter than everyone else. Thought he'd covered his tracks. Thought his sweet old grandmother would never suspect the truth. He was about to learn that the people you underestimate are the ones who bring you down. James called that night. I've set up monitoring on the accounts we know about. If Callan moves more money, we'll know immediately. And Lorraine? One more thing. Vanessa's been looking at flight schedules. One-way tickets to the Cayman Islands. She's planning to run. My hands tightened on the phone. Let her look. Let them both think they're about to get away with it. Justice doesn't rush, James. It waits. And then it strikes. The call came at 2 a.m. Margaret's number flashing on my phone, pulling me from shallow sleep. I knew before I answered.
You always know when the worst is about to happen.
Nana. Her voice was broken glass. Something's wrong.
The baby.
There's blood. I was dressed and in my car within minutes, my hands shaking on the steering wheel as I drove through empty streets. The hospital loomed ahead, all fluorescent lights and antiseptic fear. I found Margaret in labor and delivery, hooked up to monitors that beeped urgent warnings. Her face was pale as paper. Where's Callan? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He's not answering. Fresh tears streaked her cheeks. I've called him 15 times. Texted. Nothing. He said he had a late meeting. But Nana, it's 2 a.m. What kind of meeting lasts until 2 a.m? The kind where you're with your mistress planning your escape, I thought. But I didn't say it. Just held her hand while doctors rushed in and out, their faces professionally neutral in that way that means everything's falling apart. Baby Noah was born at 6:17 that morning. 5 weeks early. 3 pounds, 12 ounces. They whisked him away to the NICU before Margaret could even hold him, his tiny cry echoing down the hallway like an accusation. Margaret sobbed into her hands while nurses cleaned her up and spoke in soft, practiced voices about procedures and outcomes and waiting. Callan showed up at 9. Strolled into that hospital room like he had all the time in the world, coffee in hand, his shirt wrinkled. When he saw me sitting beside Margaret's bed, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe. Or just annoyance that I was there to witness his failure. Where were you? Margaret's voice was hollow, empty of everything except the echo of pain. I told you. A meeting ran late. My phone died. Your son was born 3 hours ago. He's in the NICU fighting to breathe, and you were in a meeting. He had the audacity to look offended. Margaret, I'm building something here. This firm, this life, it's all for you. For us. I can't just drop everything every time you get scared. Every time you get scared. Like their baby being born premature was a tantrum. Like her fear was an inconvenience. I stood up. Get out. He blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out of this room. Your wife just gave birth alone while you were God, knows we're doing God knows what. The least you can do is leave her in peace. Nana, you don't understand the pressure I'm under.
No, Callan.
You don't understand the pressure you've created. Now leave. Before I say something we'll both regret. He looked at Margaret, waiting for her to defend him. She turned her face to the wall. He left without another word, his coffee cup still in his hand like he'd just been mildly inconvenienced on his way to work. Margaret cried until she had nothing left. I held her while nurses came and went, while machines beeped, while somewhere down the hall her premature son fought for every breath. Around noon, they finally let us see Noah. He was so small, tubes and wires covering his tiny body. But his eyes were open, alert, already fighting. He's going to be okay, I whispered to Margaret. He's stronger than his father ever was. That afternoon, while Margaret slept fitfully in her hospital bed, I stepped into the hallway and called James. It's time. Are you sure? I'm sure. My grandson missed his son's birth. He put his pregnant wife under so much stress that the baby came early. Whatever happens now, he earned it. Would you expose the truth if it meant destroying someone you love? James didn't argue. I'll have the package ready by tomorrow morning. Anonymous, like we discussed. The state licensing board, the district attorney's office, the IRS. They'll all get copies of everything we've found. And Vanessa? She'll get her own package. With a note explaining that Callan's been setting her up to take the fall. Let's see if loyalty survives self-preservation. I hung up and stood in that hospital hallway watching people come and go. Families visiting new babies born healthy and whole. Fathers who'd been there for the births, who looked at their wives with gratitude and love. Everything Callan should have been, but chose not to be. The next morning, packages were delivered. Anonymous manila envelopes stuffed with bank records, transfer receipts, client complaints, and a detailed timeline of every crime Callan had committed over the past year. James had included a cover letter explaining the evidence, suggesting where investigators should look, making it impossible to ignore. By noon, Callan's phone was ringing off the hook.
Client demanding answer.
The licensing board scheduling emergency meetings. And somewhere across town, Vanessa was opening her own envelope, reading proof that the man she'd trusted was planning to let her go to prison while he walked free. Margaret was still in the hospital with Noah when the first investigator showed up at the firm.
She didn't know yet what I'd done.
Didn't know that the ground beneath her husband's feet was already crumbling. But she would soon. I sat beside her in the NICU, watching our tiny fighter breathe through tubes, and thought about justice. How it doesn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrives in a manila envelope. Sometimes it whispers instead of shouts. And sometimes, the people who deserve it most never see it coming until it's too late. The collapse happened faster than I'd expected. Within 48 hours, everything Callan had built turned to ash. Clients pulled their contracts. Investors threatened lawsuits. The licensing board launched a formal investigation. And Vanessa, smart enough to save herself, turned on him completely. She gave investigators everything. Emails detailing transfers. Text messages where Callan explained how to hide money. Voice recordings she'd apparently been making for months. Insurance for herself in case things went wrong. Turned out she'd known exactly what she was getting into and had been collecting evidence the whole time. When the ship started sinking, she grabbed her lifeboat and paddled away without looking back. Callan's BMW got repossessed on a Tuesday. I heard about it from Richard, who called to tell me the firm was shutting down. 20 people losing their jobs because one man couldn't control his greed. Richard's voice was tired, but not surprised. We all suspected something was wrong. We just didn't want to believe it. That's always the problem, isn't it? We don't want to believe the people we trust are capable of betrayal. So we ignore the signs until we can't anymore. Margaret came home from the hospital on Wednesday without Noah. He had to stay another week, maybe 2, until his lungs were stronger. She moved through her house like a ghost, touching things that belonged to a life that no longer existed. The BMW was gone. The credit cards were frozen. Bank accounts seized pending investigation. Everything Callan had told her they owned turned out to be built on stolen money, and now it was all disappearing. Thursday night, Callan showed up at my door. I'd been expecting him. Had tea brewing, the good china on the table, like we were about to have a pleasant conversation about the weather. When I opened the door, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. Nana, they're destroying me. He pushed past me into my living room, pacing like a caged animal. Everything I worked for, everything I built, it's all gone. Someone sent evidence to the investigators. Someone's been watching me, collecting information. And now they're trying to ruin my life. I poured tea with steady hands. Sit down, Callan. I can't sit down. They're accusing me of embezzlement.
Wide fraud.
They're talking about criminal charges. Prison, Nana. Do you understand? Prison. I understand perfectly. I set his cup on the table.
Seat.
Down. Something in my voice made him stop. Made him really look at me for the first time. He sat slowly, confusion crossing his face. What did you do? His voice was barely a whisper. I did what someone should have done a long time ago. I stopped you. The color drained from his face. You? You sent them the evidence. You missed your son's birth, Callan. You put your wife under so much stress that your baby was born 5 weeks early, fighting for his life in the NICU. You stole from the people who trusted you. You manipulated Margaret, controlled her money, Made her feel helpless while you spent hundreds of thousands on another woman. What did you think was going to happen? He stood up fast enough to knock his chair over. You had no right. That was my business, my life. Your life? My voice rose for the first time. What about Margaret's life? What about Noah's? What about all the clients you stole from, the employees who are losing their jobs because of your greed? When did their lives stop mattering? I was going to fix it. I had a plan. Your plan was to run away to the Cayman Islands with Vanessa and let her take the fall for your crimes. That was your plan. Don't stand in my house and pretend you were going to make things right. Do you think he deserved forgiveness or the full weight of karma? He stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Maybe I had. Maybe the grandmother who'd baked him lemon pound cake and made excuses for his behavior had died the moment I saw him with his hand on another woman's back while his pregnant wife waited at home. Please. His voice broke. He fell to his knees right there in my living room, the way he used to when he was little and wanted something badly enough to beg. Nana, please.
You can fix this. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you were confused.
They'll believe you. You're old. They'll think you just got mixed up.
Old.
He wanted me to play senile to save him from the consequences of his own choices. Get up, Callan. Please, Nana. I'll lose everything. Margaret will leave me. I'll go to prison. My whole life will be over. Your life isn't over. But the life you were living, the one built on lies and theft and betrayal? Yes, that life is done. He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. Real tears, probably the first honest thing he'd shown me in years. But I didn't bend, didn't soften. Just watched him kneel there in the ruins of his own making. I love you, Callan. I always have. I always will. But love doesn't mean protecting you from the truth. It means holding you accountable so you have a chance to become better. And right now, the most loving thing I can do is let you face what you've done. He stood slowly, wiped his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder. You've destroyed me. You know that? My own grandmother destroyed me.
No, honey.
You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone else could see it. He left without another word, walked out of my house and into whatever future waited for him beyond my door. I stood at the window and watched him drive away in a car that probably belonged to someone else, and I felt something break inside my chest. Not regret, just the final severing of who I'd thought he was from who he'd actually become. That night, I called Margaret, told her everything about the evidence, the investigation, my role in it all. She listened in silence. When I finished, she said 4 words that told me I'd done the right thing. Thank you for saving us. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months of depositions, interviews, audits, and reconstructed paper trails. Callan hired lawyers who tried to claim he'd been deceived by Vanessa, that he'd trusted the wrong person. But the evidence was too strong. The recordings too clear. Even his own emails proved he'd been the mastermind. In the end, he took a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement. Could have been worse. His lawyers convinced the prosecutor that he was young, that he'd made mistakes, that he deserved a chance at rehabilitation. 5 years. It seemed both like forever and not nearly enough. Margaret filed for divorce while he was awaiting sentencing. She didn't cry when she told me. Just signed the papers with steady hands and said, I deserve better. Noah deserves better. She was right. She did deserve better. And slowly, she started building it. The firm's assets were liquidated to pay back clients. Margaret got a small settlement, enough to cover immediate expenses. But more importantly, she got her freedom. For the first time in 7 years, she controlled her own money, made her own decisions, started breathing again without permission. She found work at a small design studio. Turned out she had a talent for interior design that nobody had known about because Callan had never asked what she wanted to do with her life. Just told her to make a home while he built an empire on quicksand. Noah came home from the NICU after 2 weeks. Still small, still fragile, but alive. Fighting. Every breath he took felt like a miracle. Margaret set up the nursery with furniture from thrift stores and hand-me-downs from church friends. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, built on real money and real work. Callan wrote letters from prison, one every week at first. Long letters full of apologies and explanations and promises to change. Margaret threw them away without reading them, but she sent them to me and I read every word. He was sorry. That much was real. Sorry he'd been caught. Sorry his life had fallen apart. Whether he was sorry for the actual harm he'd caused, I couldn't tell. Maybe he didn't know the difference yet. Prison has a way of teaching those lessons slowly. Do you believe people who destroy others can truly change? I wrote back. Once a month. Short letters that never offered forgiveness, but never withdrew love. I told him about Noah's milestones. About Margaret's new job. About the life that was growing in the wreckage he'd left behind. I reminded him that consequences weren't punishment. They were education. That his job now was to learn from them. His responses got shorter. Less defensive. I didn't know if I believed him. Didn't know if change was possible for someone who'd fallen as far as he had. But I kept writing. Because that's what grandmothers do. We hold the line between accountability and abandonment. We don't rescue people from their consequences, but we don't let them drown in them either. Margaret thrived in ways I hadn't expected. She took night classes in business management. Started putting money in savings. Made friends who didn't know her as Callan's wife. Just as Margaret. A woman with her own thoughts and dreams and worth that didn't depend on someone else's approval. One Sunday afternoon, she brought Noah to my house for dinner. He was 6 months old by then, chubby and giggly and perfect. We sat in my backyard watching him try to grab butterflies, his laughter floating through the air like music. Do you ever regret it? Margaret asked suddenly. Turning him in? I thought about it.
Really thought about it. No.
I regret that it had to happen. I regret that he made choices that hurt so many people. But turning him in?
No.
That was the only way to stop the damage from spreading. She nodded, picked Noah up and held him close. I want him to grow up knowing that love means telling the truth, even when it's hard. That family doesn't mean covering up wrong. It means not letting the people you love destroy themselves. You're going to be a good mother, Margaret. I learned from a good grandmother, she said, smiling at me. And in that moment, sitting in my backyard with the woman my grandson had tried to break and the baby who'd survived his father's chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in months.
Peace.
Callan had 4.5 years left to serve. 4.5 years to figure out who he wanted to be when he got out. Whether he'd use that time wisely, I didn't know. But it wasn't my job to control his choices anymore. Just to make sure they didn't control everyone else. The firm's old office building got sold. Someone turned it into condos. I drove past it one day and barely recognized it. Fresh paint. New windows. All traces of what it had been erased like it had never existed. Maybe that was fitting. Some things need to be demolished before something better can be built in their place. I walked past the building on a Tuesday morning. The same building where I'd once stood holding lemon pound cake and hope. It looked smaller now. Less impressive. Funny how things shrink when you see them clearly. The glass doors were polished. A new company name gleamed on the directory. Architectural dreams replaced by tech startups and law offices. No trace left of Callan's firm. No memorial to the empire he'd tried to build on lies. Just clean slate and fresh starts, the way it should be. I didn't go inside. Didn't need to. That building belonged to the past now, and I was trying to live in the present. Trying to find the lesson in all this pain, the purpose in the betrayal. Because there had to be one. There had to be a reason I'd had to watch my grandson fall so far. If this story touched your heart, hit like and share it with someone who believes in quiet justice. Maybe the reason was Margaret. She was 32 now, the same age Callan had been when everything collapsed. But she was nothing like him. She'd taken her broken pieces and built something solid. Last month, she'd opened her own design consultation business. Small, just her and one assistant. But it was real. Honest work with honest money and clients who trusted her because she'd earned it. Noah was 8 months old. Crawling. getting into everything. He had his father's eyes, but his mother's gentle spirit. Every Sunday, Margaret brought him to my house, and we'd have dinner together. Just the three of us. A grandmother, a young mother, and a baby who'd never know the chaos he'd been born into.
Not yet anyway.
Someday Margaret would have to tell him about his father. But that was years away. For now, we just loved him. Protected him. Gave him the stability his parents' marriage had never had. Callan called once a month. Prison phone calls limited to 15 minutes. He mostly asked about Noah. Wanted to know if he was healthy, if he was happy, if he looked like him. Margaret let him ask but never sent photos. Said Noah would decide someday if he wanted a relationship with his father, but she wasn't going to force it. I still wrote letters. Still sent them to that prison address in Pennsylvania, where Callan was serving his time. His responses had changed over the months. Less self-pity. More reflection. He'd started working in the prison library, taking courses on ethics and accountability, reading books about men who'd lost everything and found something better in the ruins. Whether it was real or just another performance, I couldn't tell. Time would answer that question. It always does. I thought about justice a lot these days. How it doesn't always roar with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it works slowly, quietly, in ways you don't notice until you look back and see how far you've come from where you were. The people Callan had stolen from got most of their money back. Not all of it. Some things can't be recovered. But enough. Enough to rebuild. Enough to trust again. Richard started a new firm, smaller and more careful. Some of the old employees joined him. They survived. Vanessa disappeared. Took her immunity deal and her shame, and went somewhere else to start over. I didn't feel sorry for her. She'd known what she was doing. Made her choices. Now she had to live with them somewhere far from the wreckage. I stood on the sidewalk outside that building watching people come and go. Young professionals in suits carrying coffee and ambition. None of them knew this place used to house a firm run by a thief. None of them cared. They were too busy building their own futures to worry about someone else's past. That's how life works.
It moves on.
Covers over old scars with new growth. Turns yesterday's tragedies into today's parking spaces. I walked to the park. Same bench where I'd sat after confronting Callan that first day. Same view of the river. But everything felt different. Lighter. The weight of secrets had been crushing me for months, and I hadn't even realized it until they were gone. Margaret texted me a photo. Noah smiling at the camera, his 2 new teeth showing, wearing the sweater I'd knitted him. The message said, he wants to know if Nana is making cookies today. I smiled. Texted back that I'd make double batch. One for Noah. One for his mama, who worked too hard and deserved sweetness. The sun cut through the trees, warming my face. Somewhere across town, my grandson sat in a cell paying for his crimes. Somewhere nearby, his wife and son were building a life that didn't include him. And here I sat, the grandmother who'd brought it all down, feeling something I'd thought I'd lost forever.
Hope.
Not hope that Callan would come back and everything would be magically fixed. That wasn't how life worked. But hope that Noah would grow up in a home built on truth instead of lies. Hope that Margaret would find love again someday, real love that didn't come with conditions and control. Hope that maybe, just maybe, my grandson would use his time in prison to become the man I'd once believed he was. I looked at Noah's photo on my phone, his innocent eyes staring at the camera. And I thought, maybe the curse ends here. Maybe this baby gets to grow up knowing that love means honesty. That family means accountability. That you don't get to hurt people without consequences, no matter how much someone loves you. That would be enough. That would make all of this worth it. I wanted to surprise my grandson at his office. I did surprise him. But I was the one who learned the lesson. Funny how that works, isn't it? You think you're going to teach someone something, and instead life turns the tables. Makes you the student. Forces you to learn lessons you didn't know you needed. I learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enabling. It's permission. It's a blank check for someone to keep hurting people because they know you'll always clean up the mess. Real love holds people accountable. Stands firm when they fall. says no when they need to hear it, even when saying yes would be easier. I learned that forgiveness isn't the same as blindness. For years, I'd thought being a good grandmother meant always believing the best in Callan, always giving him another chance, always making excuses. But that wasn't faith in him. That was fear. Fear of admitting I'd failed. Fear of losing him. Fear of facing the truth that the boy I'd raised had become someone I didn't recognize. Real forgiveness sees clearly, acknowledges the harm, names it, and then chooses to hope for better while protecting yourself and others from more damage. I learned that God allows betrayal sometimes, not to destroy us, to open our eyes, to show us what we've been refusing to see. That moment in the lobby when I saw Callan with his hand on another woman's back, laughing while his pregnant wife waited at home, that was a gift. A painful, terrible gift, but a gift nonetheless, because it forced me to stop pretending. Margaret came over yesterday with Noah. He's almost a year old now, starting to walk, grabbing furniture and pulling himself up with that determined look babies get when they're learning something new. He fell about 20 times, and every single time he got back up. Didn't cry, didn't quit, just tried again. Margaret and I sat on the porch watching him. She's different now too. Stronger. There's a confidence in her that wasn't there before. Like she finally figured out who she is when nobody's telling her who to be. Have you heard from him? She asked. She never says Callan's name anymore. Just him. Like saying the name might give it power. Last week. He's got a parole hearing in 2 years. If he behaves. She nodded. Didn't ask if I thought he'd get out early. Didn't ask what would happen if he did. We'd both learn to live in the present. The future would come whether we worried about it or not. Do you think he's changed? She watched Noah pull himself up on a chair, determination written across his tiny face. I think he's had time to think about who he was. Whether he'll use that knowledge to become someone better, I don't know. That's his choice to make. And if he doesn't, if he gets out and goes right back to being the same person,
I thought about that. Really thought about it.
then we'll deal with it. But Margaret, honey, he can't hurt us the same way twice. We're not the same people we were. You're not that scared woman living on an allowance, not knowing where your next meal comes from. And I'm not that grandmother who thinks love means looking the other way. We've learned. That's the difference. She smiled, reached over, and squeezed my hand. Thank you for teaching me that lesson, Nana. For showing me that protecting someone sometimes means letting them fall. Noah took 3 wobbling steps across the porch. 3 whole steps without holding on to anything. Then he fell, laughing, into Margaret's arms. She scooped him up and kissed his forehead. Look at you, baby boy. Getting so strong. That's what I want people to understand. When you enable someone's bad behavior, you're not helping them. You're keeping them weak. You're robbing them of the chance to build real strength through consequences and growth. Callan had to fall. Had to face what he'd done. And maybe, if he's smart, he'll use that fall to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. Not on stolen money or manipulated people or grandmothers who make excuses, but on real character built through real accountability. If you ever find yourself betrayed, don't shout. Don't scream. Don't chase after the person trying to convince them to love you better.
Sit still.
Listen.
Watch.
Because quiet justice always comes. It doesn't rush. Doesn't announce itself. Just builds slowly, brick by brick, until the truth is too big to ignore. And when that justice arrives, it speaks louder than anger ever could. I've started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. Margaret suggested it. Said maybe my story could help other women who are trapped like she was. Women who don't realize they're being controlled until it's too late. So twice a week I go down there, and I listen. I share my story. I tell them about my grandson who stole and lied and manipulated. About my daughter-in-law who found her strength. About the baby who symbolizes new beginnings. And every time I tell that story, I end the same way. I tell them that silence can be strength. That you don't always have to fight back loud to win. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop participating in your own destruction. Stop making excuses. Stop covering up lies. Stop enabling bad behavior because you're afraid of being alone or unloved or wrong. The women listen. Some of them cry. Some of them get angry. But most of them understand because they've lived it too. They know what it's like to love someone who's destroying you. To wake up one day and realize you've become a stranger to yourself. Callan will be released someday. Maybe he'll have learned something. Maybe he won't. Either way, he'll come back to a world that moved on without him. Margaret will have built a life he's not part of. Noah will be a child who knows his father only through stories and supervised visits if Margaret allows them. And I'll be here, an old woman who chose truth over comfort and never regretted it. That's the final lesson. Regret doesn't come from doing what's right. It comes from knowing what's right and choosing comfort instead. I could have kept quiet. Could have pretended I didn't see that photo, didn't know about the money, didn't understand what was happening. Could have let Callan keep destroying people while I baked him cake and told myself he was still that sweet boy I'd raised. But I would have regretted that every day for the rest of my life. This way, I sleep at night. I look in the mirror and recognize the woman looking back. I hold my great-grandson, knowing I protected him from a legacy of lies. That's worth more than any relationship built on pretending. So if you're sitting there right now facing your own betrayal, your own moment of truth, wondering whether to speak up or stay silent, let me tell you something. The people who love you don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be honest. And sometimes honest means hard. Sometimes it means letting people fall. Sometimes it means being the bad guy in someone else's story, so you can be the hero in your own. Choose truth. Choose accountability. Choose quiet justice over loud enabling. And then watch what grows in the soil of honesty. It might not be what you expected, but it will be real. And real always wins in the end. Subscribe for more powerful stories of truth, justice, and redemption. Turn on notifications so you never miss another story that might speak to your heart, might help you find your strength, might remind you that you're not alone in facing hard choices. And remember, silence can be strength. Quiet justice speaks the loudest. And love without boundaries isn't love at all. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us your stories. Inspire others who might be facing their own moments of truth. Because that's how we heal. That's how we grow. Together. Honestly. With courage that sometimes looks like an old woman carrying pound cake into an office building and walking out with her dignity intact. That's the story I wanted to tell you. The story of how I surprised my grandson and learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to participate in their destruction. Even when that someone is your own flesh and blood. Even when it breaks your heart. Even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. Because quiet justice always comes. And when it does, it changes everything.